Comment to add to Kevin's, which is the ocean being the real storage, the repository of this last century's global warming. And that's what connects global warming and climate change. There's another piece of this, which is, and I refer you to a piece that I wrote in the Huffington Post about a week ago, addressing just this. There has been so much warming towards the North Pole that there is warming, melting, thawing, thinning of Greenland ice and Arctic ice. That's not news. We all know that. But it's very significant. And what it does is hot air rises and creates a low pressure system. But cool air creates a high. And weather flows downhill, as it were, from highs to lows. So it's that high that's sitting over Greenland and the Arctic, the North Atlantic. From melting of ice from the bottom, from the sea, from above, from the ocean, and then slippage along the base. That's what Kevin was referring to, that climate scientists are predicting this, because it's those changes and warming leading to melting and thawing that is creating this tremendous high in the northern hemisphere, sending winds and weather and fronts across Europe, and blocking the jet stream as it moves across the U.S. So the jet stream has been dipping way down to Miami, where Alan was a few weeks ago. And so it's that high up there, warming leading to melting, that is the key. And that's all about what's happening in the depths of the ocean. It's melting the ice.
I wanted to change tone a little bit and follow up on a question to Alan for the whole panel. You were talking about the need to create a movement, and you referenced the civil rights movement, the anti-war movement. During the civil rights movement, we all saw on television the police dogs and the fire hoses. During the Vietnam War, we saw the coffins coming back. Right now, what we're not seeing is the connection made between all these extreme, very dramatic weather events, as well as spread of disease, as well as other effects. So for me, given my professional background, the question is, how do we get the press to make these connections, which I think are fundamental to creating the receptivity to the kind of movement that you're talking about?
I mean, you could probably answer that question better. It's your profession, your colleagues. I'd say that, well, two things. I do think we need a broader movement. I mean, there is the environmental movement, but I think it's got to be lined up. And first, the leadership has to get together and go on a strategic retreat and say, okay, we got to agree on an agenda and on a strategy. That's what work with civil rights. And then once you have that, then you get the grassroots involved and everybody's pushing that. You know, I'd say two things. One, here's the thing about today, with social media, we can be our own media. And there's tons of creativity. And the good news is the millennials get this. The bad news is they may not be in power soon enough. I mean, you know, my daughter, who's 8, you know, we watched the movie about the polar bears. And, you know, ever since that was media. She's like, Daddy, turn off the lights. You know, we gotta save the polar bears. That stuff works. But, you know, with social media now, anybody can put something on YouTube. We got, you know, Bill McKibben's been great on this with 350.org. So some of it we have to be our own media and self-publish. But again, if you've got all the organizations that are involved with this and the citizens they represent, say, okay, here are 10 brilliant pieces of visual media that documents this. Now we're going to use all of our networks, all of our Facebook friends, all the social YouTube, and we're going to send it out and say here, and then share this, and then do house parties, and get your computer and show it. So one is be our own media. No language, that's one. Secondly, you can't get, media will respond to big events. I mean, as I mentioned, you know, one of the ways we got the Serve America Act passed was we did a big summit. And we got Obama and McCain to come on 9/11. We got both, you know, but we had a coalition of 120 groups that collectively reached 100 million people. That's how we got them to come. And then we got all these other leaders to come. And then the media covered that. And we got Time Magazine to agree to do a cover story. So part of it also is reaching out to particular media leaders and say, if you do some big events, you know, will you cover this? Or find people like you who get, you know, activated and say, well, you take this up as a cause. Well, I think the media will follow the citizens. If we can get citizens engaged, do the equivalent of the March on Washington today for around climate change or climate disruption. The media will follow, but you're right. The civil rights stuff, it was the dogs and the hoses and those dramatic images. But we're in a different place now. I mean, there are, in the 60s, most of the country, because it wasn't, everywhere, didn't understand how bad it was in parts of the country. There are a critical mass of people, even with the statistics that Meghna referenced, who believe that this is a serious issue. Especially people who have children and grandchildren, because they know we're being irresponsible in terms of how we're going to handle the planet. And so it's a different kind of activism that's needed. In the 60s, people had to just realize, well, look what's going on in the South. Here, we have to sort of get people to work together. I think that's a different kind of challenge. And once we start to do that, I think the media will follow.